I have to confess, when I first heard Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's despicable and pandering, shameful speech on the Senate floor last week, I was not surprised, just saddened. The speech was proof positive that the national Democratic leadership and the Biden administration are immoral, feckless, hypocritical, pandering ideologues who are so desperate to stay in power they would sell their own mothers. Now back to Schumer's vile speech, which touched a lot of bases, all of them bad. First, he suggested that right in the middle of a war with jihadist terrorists bent on the destruction and murder of every Jew in Israel, from the river to the sea, that Israel should topple its government, throw out its prime minister, commit to a ceasefire, which would allow Hamas to regroup and refortify in Rafah, by the way. Schumer's speech could be some of the dumbest remarks I have ever heard. That would have been like the equivalent of Winston Churchill calling President Franklin Roosevelt to be removed as president after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, or for our European allies to call for the removal of President George W. Bush after al-Qaeda terrorists attacked America on 9/11. I don't remember, after the Normandy invasion against the Nazis, or our island-hopping advance on the Japanese mainland in the Pacific in World War II, anyone calling for a ceasefire for humanitarian purposes. Obviously, that would have let the Nazis and Japanese refortify and reestablish their positions, and by the way, cost hundreds of thousands of more of American lives. But Chuck Schumer knew all that. Look, even though Netanyahu is unpopular in Israel, and he has his share of legal issues, he rightfully has almost unanimous support, 94 votes to 5 in support in the Knesset, to prosecute the war and eliminate the existential threat that Hamas presents. Further, Schumer also knows that the likely successor to Netanyahu would come from another member of the Israeli war cabinet whom, although political rivals of Netanyahu, fully support his handling of the war and would do exactly the same thing. That's how despicable the hypocrisy of Schumer and Biden are. Second, Schumer sees Netanyahu as being an impediment to a two-state solution and therefore has to go. That's a lie. Let me be perfectly clear about this. There have been proposals by at least the last 8 United States administrations, all the way back to President Richard M. Nixon, for a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. And it hasn't happened. And it's not going to happen. Because whether it's the PLO, you remember them, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, or any other governing entity in Palestine, they do not want the two-state solution. They want to annihilate the Jewish state of Israel and every Jew living there. Schumer knows this. Israel knows this. The Palestinians know this. But we pretend that we don't know. And Palestinian leadership pretends that they don't know that we know. Everybody knows. The two-state solution is United States hypocrisy disguised as diplomacy. When will we ever learn that the U.S.'s view of the world and how it should exist usually does not conform to what those peoples and their government want? Does Vietnam ring a bell to anybody? Schumer actually said, with no authority to do so, and I'm quoting him, "Then the U.S. will have no choice but to play a more active role in shaping Israel's policy by using our leverage to change the present course," end quote. Since Schumer knows all of this, why would he be advocating such an immoral, illegal, and unattainable remedy? I have an idea. I'll tell you why. Because we have a president who is deteriorating before our very eyes. In a recent interview in which Biden recounted a G7 summit he attended after being elected president in 2020, he recalled a conversation he had with the president of France, Emmanuel Macron. Unfortunately, Biden referenced that conversation was with Mitterrand from Germany before correcting it back to France. But he persisted with the notion that the conversation was with Mitterrand. Francois Mitterrand was the president of France. He was right, but he died in 1996. Wow. Maybe that's why 60% of Democratic voters don't want Biden as their nominee, and any chance to win re-election will require victories in a few swing states where the margins are razor thin. The Democrats are petrified, for example, that 100,000 plus pro-Palestinian voters in Dearborn, Michigan, which happens to be the district of Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. You remember her. She was censured by her own House of Representatives for her pro-Palestinian rhetoric, including, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," code for the murder of all Jews in Israel. The Democrats are afraid that support for Israel could cost Biden the election. Apparently, they're not concerned that appeasing the pro-Palestinian wing of the Democratic Party might cost them a few Jewish votes across the country as well. Stay tuned.